Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Allahumma alimna ma yanfa'una wa anfa'na bima 'allamtana wa zidna ilma. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Amma ba'd. Continuing in the explanation of the kitab Furu al Fiqh by Al-Imam Ibn al-Mibrad al-Hanbali rahimahullah. Last time we got to the topic of al-tahara, purification, specifically al-tahara an al-hadath, purifying oneself from the state of impurity which a person is in. And we mentioned that al-tahara an al-hadath naw'an, it is two types: al-tahara al-sughra, the minor impurity, the minor purification, which is wudu, and al-tahara al-kubra, the major purification, which is al-ghusl. So we will be speaking now about the minor purification, al-tahara al-sughra, which is wudu. So the Imam said, وَمَا الطَّهَارَةُ فَهِيَ واحد صغرى وهي الوضوء ويحتوي على السنة وهو التسمية. So the first type of purification, الطهارة الصغرى وهي الوضوء, which is wudu. يحتوي على, it contains within it sunnah, and after he's going to mention wajib. And we mentioned in the previous lesson that sunnah, it is something which is a recommendation, mustahab, meaning if a person does it, then they are rewarded, and if they leave it off, then this does not affect the validity of the act of worship. Then we mentioned that there's also al-wajib wal-fard, and the fard also being known as a-rukn. Al-wajib, it is one which a person who leaves it off on purpose, this invalidates the act of worship. As for leaving it off due to forgetfulness or due to not knowing of its obligation, then in such a case the act of worship remains valid. And al-fard, it is one which a person, if they leave it off, then the act of worship, such as wudu in this case, it becomes invalid regardless of whether they left it off on purpose or by accident due to forgetting or not knowing of its obligation. But here the Imam, he only categorizes into two types: sunnah, which is clear, and wajib. And by wajib here, he means al-fard, what we called al-fard earlier on, as per the terminology, the istilah of the mu'tamad position in the Hanbali madhab, the relied upon position, that here is being called wajib, obligation. And this difference is only al-farq fil istilah, and as the ulama say, la mashahata fil istilah, there is no problem in differing in terminologies. So why didn't the Imam categorize it into three types? The reason being, the two things which we would normally classify as being wajib, as being obligations, in the relied upon position of the Hanbali madhab, those two things, the Imam has classified them as being sunnah, recommendations. So therefore, he only needed two categories, not three. So the first one he is speaking about is as-sunnah. And the first sunnah, he said, وَهُوَ التَّسْمِيَةِ. At-tasmiyah, it is to say Bismillah. This is the meaning of at-tasmiyah. And this is different to al-basmalah. When the ulama say al-basmalah, they mean saying Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. As for at-tasmiyah, it is only Bismillah. Here the Imam is saying that this is min sunan al-wudu. It is a recommendation in wudu to say Bismillah in the beginning. As for the relied upon position, the Hanbali madhab, then they say that saying at-tasmiyah, saying Bismillah, this is wajib, an obligation. Meaning if a person leaves it off on purpose, then their wudu is invalid. And this is also a wajib, also an obligation for ghusl, as is going to come later, and also for tayammum. And the second thing mentioned is غسل الكفين قبله ثلاثا. So we know now that a person, if they leave off saying Bismillah in the beginning of wudu, then this makes their wudu invalid according to the mu'tamad Hanbali position. But what if they forget it, or they don't know of its obligation? Then we say, then it is valid. But what if they forget it, but remember in the middle of their wudu? What do they have to do? If they remember in the middle of wudu, then they have to say the Bismillah, say the tasmiyah in the middle of the wudu. And do they continue, or do they start over from the beginning? The position which is in al-Muntaha, Muntaha al-Iradat, by Ibn al-Najjar, which is a relied upon position, it says that they have to start again from the beginning. As for the other position which is mentioned in Al-Iqna' by Al-Hajjawi, that says that they just continue. So those are the two positions in the madhab, and the relied, as I said, it is that they have to start the wudu again from the beginning. Now, the next obligation here mentioned it is, or the next sunnah mentioned here, it is غسل الكفين قبله ثلاثا, washing the hands, al-kaffain, before it, قبله, يعني قبل الوضوء, before wudu, 3 times. And here, al-kaffain, the hands, means من أطراف الأصابع, from the tips of the fingers, including the nails, to the wrists, الرسخ, or al-kaw'ain, the 2 wrists, including the wrists. Then this is a recommendation, a sunnah. But there is one case in which this becomes a wajib, an obligation, which is when the person gets up from sleep in the night, waking up from sleep in the night, when that sleep breaks the person's wudu. So it is لِقَائِمٍ مِّن نَوْمِ لَيْلٍ نَاقِضٍ لِوُضُو, a person who gets up from a deep sleep in the night, the sort of sleep which breaks one's wudu, and this is in the night, not in the morning, then this person, they are obligated to wash their hands 3 times before doing wudu. And if they don't wash it 3 times before doing wudu, then this invalidates their wudu, if they leave it off on purpose. As for if they forget, or if they don't know of its obligation, then their wudu is sahih, valid. What if they remember in the middle of the wudu, they're doing wudu, they're washing their face, for example, or their arms, and they remember that they didn't wash their hands 3 times at the beginning, then here also, they don't have to start again, rather they continue, and then that obligation falls off them, and it is left. So that is the second case, which is the second sunnah recommendation, which is غسل اليدين, washing the hands, or al-kaffain, the hands, before wudu 3 times. And this, washing it 3 times, when it is obligatory, meaning when it's for a person who has gotten up from the night from sleeping in the night, then it is obligatory to wash it 3 times. And if they only wash it twice or 1 time, then this has not fulfilled the obligation, rather they have to do it 3 times. Likewise, for this washing of the hands 3 times, it is conditioned in it also that the person has niyyah, intention, and the niyyah has to be لغسل اليدين ثلاثا. It has to be with the intention of washing the hands 3 times, لقائم من النوم, for a person who has gotten up from their sleep in the night. And the intention, niyyatul wudu, it is not sufficient. If a person has the mere intention of doing wudu when washing their hands 3 times before starting the wudu, then this intention is not valid for it. Rather, this has a specific intention, because this is a tahara mustaqillah, a separate act of purification, which needs to be present before beginning the wudu. And likewise, for this washing of the hands 3 times, when a person has gotten up from their sleep in the night, this doesn't have to be right before the wudu. It can be any time, from once they get up all the way until they want to do wudu. So they can do it in the morning, and then so they wash their hands 3 times with the intention and with saying Bismillah. Then they can do wudu later on, much later on if they want, and they don't have to wash their hands 3 times at the beginning again. And saying Bismillah for this is also a wajib. It is also obligatory to say Bismillah for this purification, which is washing the hands 3 times for a person who has gotten up in the night, who has gotten up from sleeping in the night. The next recommendation, it is وَالْغَسْلُ الثَّانِيَةُ وَالثَّالِثَةُ, washing each body part in wudu the 2nd and 3rd time. This is a sunnah, a recommendation. As for washing it the first time, then this is the obligation, it is the fard. So when you're washing your hands, when you're washing your face and your arms and your feet, all of these, it's obligatory to wash them once. Washing it 1 time fulfills the obligation. As for washing them a 2nd time and the 3rd time, then these are sunan, recommendations. As for going beyond 3 times, then this is makruh, disliked. So when a person is doing wudu and they're washing their face, the first wash, this fulfills the obligation. The 2nd and 3rd, these are recommendations, sunan. And obviously this does not apply to mas'hul ra's, wiping the head, as will come. Mashu Ra's, it is min furud al-wudu, it is from the obligations in wudu. This is only wiped once. Wiping it more than once is makruh, disliked. The next is وَتَخْلِيلُ الْأَصَابِعِ وَاللِّحْيَةِ. تَخْلِيل al-asabi' wal-lihya means when you rub between your fingers and your toes, and when you run your fingers through the beard. This is also a sunnah. So when a person is washing their hands in the beginning of wudu, or when washing their arms and their hands after washing the face, then here it is recommended to do تَخْلِيلُ الْأَصَابِعِ, to run your fingers between each other. So you wash the middle, you rub the middle off, the middle parts between your fingers. And also for the toes, asabi' ar-rijlain, the toes of your feet, it is also recommended to wipe or to rub between the gaps between the toes. And this is recommended to do with your left hand, with the left pinky, the pinky on your left hand. It is recommended to run it through, to rub it between your toes, and you begin with the right foot, and you begin with the smallest toe on your right foot, meaning on the right hand side of the right foot. You start with that, and then you go left towards the left, towards the biggest toe. Then after that, when you've done all of the gaps on your right foot, you go to the left foot, and you start from the right hand side of your left foot, meaning from the biggest toe, and you go and you continue to the left in this order, so that you have done tayamun, meaning that you have went from right to left on both of your feet. And also takhlil al-lihya, to run your fingers through your beard when washing the face. This is recommended to do either when washing the face or when wiping the head. In either of these two places, you do one or the other. And the way in which it is done, it is by أخذ كف من ماء من تحتي, to take a handful of water and put it from the bottom of your beard and then run your fingers through it, or to take it from both sides, to put the water in from both sides and run your fingers through it that way. This is also a sunnah. And the next one, it is وَالْمُبَالَغَةُ فِي الْمَضْمَضَةِ وَالْإِسْتِنْشَاقِ. Al-madmada, it is to wash the mouth in wudu, and al-istinshaq, it is to wash the nose, to pull water up your nose. This is, as will come, it is part of washing the face, so it is a fard. But as for al-mubalagha fihi, to do exaggeration in it, yani to wash it thoroughly, then this is a sunnah. How is this done? For the mouth, it is بِإِدَارَةِ الْمَاءِ فِيهِ أو في كله, to run the water, to gargle it, or to move it around in your whole mouth, from the front of your mouth all the way to the back, and all of its sides. This is al-mubalaghatu fil madmada, and this is recommended. And as for the mere obligation, al-fard, of washing the mouth, it is fulfilled by idaratul ma'i fi ba'd al-fam, to move the water around in part of your mouth. Even if it's a small part, then this is what fulfills the obligation, and anything beyond that, it is sunnah. And as for al-istinshaq, washing the nose, the obligation is to pull the water up all the way to the top of your nose. This is al-mubalaghatu fil istinshaq. And as for the mere minimum, the bare minimum in fulfilling the obligation, the fard of washing the nose, then it is idkhal al-ma fi batinihi, fi batin al-anf, to enter water into the inside of your nose. That is the mere obligation. And putting it all the way up, then this is al-mubalagha, and it is recommended. And this al-mubalaghatu fil istinshaq wa fil madmada, this is only recommended for a person who is not sa'im, li ghayri sa'im. As for a sa'im, a person who is fasting, then this is not recommended for them to do, because they might accidentally swallow the water. And al-istinthar is also recommended. Al-istinthar, it is to blow the water out of your nose after pulling it up. And this al-istinthar, it is recommended to do it with your left hand, to blow the water out of your nose using your left hand. The next recommendation is as-siwak. As-siwak, it is the brushing of your teeth with a oud, with a stick taken from a tree. This is mustahab, it is recommended, and the sunnah in the madhab, fi kulli waqt, in every time. And there are certain times where it is more recommended, one of them being in al-wudu. During the wudu, it is recommended to use the siwak. And the time which this is done in the wudu, it is عند المضمضة, when a person is washing their mouth, then here it is recommended to do siwak with it as well. And as I said, the siwak is only done with a oud, with a stick. As for doing siwak, or doing tasawwuk, to brush your teeth with anything which is not a siwak, such as with a khirqa, a piece of cloth, or a toothbrush, or your finger, then this is not recommended, and this does not fulfill the sunnah according to the Hanbali madhab. And at tasawwuk, using the siwak, it is recommended to do it with your left hand. And it's recommended to start with the right hand side of your mouth. So you begin from the right hand side of your mouth, from the middle of the mouth, from where your, I believe they're called incisors are, of the front of your teeth, from the right hand side. You go all the way to the back, to the molar teeth on your right hand side. Then you come back to the middle, then go to the left side, to the molar teeth on the left side. So this is recommended to start from the right hand, then go to the left hand side. And it's recommended to do at the tasawwuk, to use the siwak ardan, to do it horizontally, not vertically. And at tasawwuk, using the siwak, it is done ala al-asnan, on the teeth, wal litha, on the gums, and ala al-lisan, on the tongue. So on the teeth it's done horizontally, as I said, and on the tongue it's done vertically, from the bottom of your tongue to the back, and then like that. And this recommendation of a siwak, it is only recommended for a person who is not fasting, لغير الصائم, or للصائم قبل الزوال بيابس. So the first case, it's recommended, as I said, it's recommended in all cases, and it's especially recommended in wudu, but that's only if the person is not fasting, لغير الصائم. As for a person who is fasting, then it is makruh ba'da zawal. It is disliked to use siwak after az-zawal, after the beginning of the dhuhr time onwards until maghrib. This time it is disliked to use the siwak at all. As for before dhuhr, before the zawal, yani midday and before that, then if the siwak which is being used, it is yabis, dry, then it is mustahab, recommended to do it before dhuhr. And if it is ratab, if it is moist, if it is wet, if it has moisture, then it is mubah. It is allowed to use it, but it's not recommended before dhuhr. And after dhuhr, as I said, from when dhuhr begins onwards, then it is makruh mutlaqan. It is disliked unrestrictedly. And the last recommended action in wudu, min as-sunan, it is, as mentioned here, at-tayamun. At-tayamun meaning to wash the right hand side before the left hand side in all of your acts of wudu. So you wash your right hand before the left hand, and right foot before the left foot, and so on. Also, from the sunan in wudu, which is not mentioned here, it is al-mubalaghatu fi sa'iri a'dha'i al-jasad. To do mubalagha, to wash all of the parts of your body in wudu, which are washed in wudu, to do them all thoroughly. And this is bid-dalk, to do rubbing. So when you wash your face and you wash your arms and feet, it is recommended to rub it with your hands. لِمَا يَنْبُ عَنْهُ الْمَاء, for the places where the water doesn't stay on. If it's a place where the water stays on, then there is no need to do rubbing. And after that, we are now going to enter into al-furud, the obligations in wudu. As the Imam says here, وَأَمَّا الْوَاجِبِ, and as for the obligations, and as I said here, by wajib he means fard, it is فَغَسْلُ الْأَعْضَاءِ الثَّلَاثَةِ, to wash the three body parts, the three limbs in wudu, meaning the face and the arms and the feet. As for the first, which is the face, then this includes the mouth and nose, because the mouth and nose are part of the face, and they are from ظاهر البدن لا باطنه. They are from the outer part of the body, not from the inner part. Reason being, when a person puts water in their mouth while fasting, this doesn't break their fast. That means it hasn't entered into the middle of the body. Likewise, when they vomit and the vomit comes up to their mouth, but it doesn't come out of the mouth, then this also counts as vomiting, even though it didn't come out of their mouth, according to the madhab, and therefore it breaks wudu, as vomiting is one of the things which breaks wudu in the madhab. So that means that the mouth and nose are from the outer part of the body, therefore they are from the face, which need to be washed in wudu. And the face, it is from the hairline, the place where the hair begins normally for a normal person. So a person who has a receding hairline, it's not based on that for them, rather it's for the average person where the hairline begins, down to the chin, including the beard. So the water, when washing the face, also needs to wash the zahir from the beard, the front of the beard, as it's considered part of the face. وَمِنَ الْأُذْنِ إِلَى الْآخَرِ or إِلَى الْأُخْرَى, and from one ear to the other. This is also part of the face. So all of this needs to be washed in wudu. As for the temples, as-sudgh, then this is considered part of the head in the madhab. It's not considered part of the face. So meaning what's above the cheekbone, this area, which is the temple area of the forehead, and this is considered part of the head in the madhab, not part of the face. So it needs to be wiped as part of mashul ras, as will come, and it's not part of the face which needs to be washed. And as we mentioned, washing the face, it is recommended to do it 3 times, as is with the rest of the acts of worship. And this includes al-madmada wal-istinshaq, washing the mouth and nose. It's also recommended to do each 3 times. And it's recommended to do madmada wal-istinshaq before washing the face. So first you wash your mouth and your nose, then you wash the rest of the face. This is the sunnah. And washing the mouth and nose, it is recommended to do it together at the same time in one go. So you take a palm of water and you put half in your mouth and half in your nose. And you do this 3 times. But if they do it separately, and if they change their order around, then this is still permissible. The next is washing the arms, and this includes the hands. So al-yadayn, washing al-yadayn in wudu, it is from the fingertips all the way to the elbows, al-marafiq, including the elbows. All of this is also from the furud, the obligations of the wudu. So if a person washes their face, and then when it's time to wash their hands, they only begin from the wrist, and they don't wash the hand, the palm, then this makes the wudu invalid, because they haven't washed the whole arm, and this is all part of the fard, the obligation. And the next is the third part, which is washing the feet. And this is also from the toes, from the tip of the toes, all the way to and including the ankle. And the ankle is included in it as well. So if a person doesn't wash their ankle or doesn't wash their heel, then their wudu is also invalid. The next, it is وَمَسْحُ الرَّأْسِ مَعَ الْأُذُنَيْنِ. The second fard in wudu, after mentioning the face and the arms and the feet, it is مَسْحُ الرَّأْس, to wipe the head. And this is مَسْحُ الرَّأْسِ كُلِّهِ, to wipe the whole head. So wiping it partially, it does not fulfill the obligation, rather it has to be the whole head. And what is the head? It is from, as I said, from where the hairline begins, that's the part which separates the head and the face, all the way to the back to where the hair ends, just at the top of the neck. Then, and this includes also the temple and the sides of the head, above the ears, these are all part of the head, so they all need to be wiped. And the ears are also part of the head in the madhab, so it's also obligatory to wipe the ears in wudu. And if a person doesn't wipe their ears, then it is also invalid. And the wiping of the head, it is only done once. The recommendation is only to do it once, and doing it more than once is makruh, disliked. And the wiping, it is recommended to begin from the front of the head, then go all the way to the back of the head, then back to the front. Then, and that includes the sides when you're wiping, to also wipe with your hand the sides which are above the ear, because these are all part of the head. And then to wipe the ears. And wiping the ears, it's recommended to renew the water on your hands when wiping the ears. So you wet your hands again to wipe the ears. This is a sunnah recommendation in the madhab. And wiping the ears, you put the sababa, the index finger, to wipe the inside of the ears, and use the ibham, the thumb, to wipe the outsides of the ears. And the wiping here, it's recommended to do with your hand, but if it was to be used, if a person was to wipe it with something else, like a towel or something which is wet, as long as wiping still occurs, then this fulfills the obligation. Likewise, if a person was to wash their head instead of wiping it, then this would only fulfill the requirement in the fard is if it also is accompanied with wiping, meaning the movement of the rubbing of the hand. If it's merely pouring water on the head, then this does not fulfill the obligation in mas'hur ra's. The next part, it is wat-tartib, the order, to follow the order in wudu. This is also from the obligations, the furud of wudu. So if a person mixes up the order, then this invalidates their wudu. So that means the first thing is to wash the face, including the mouth and nose, then to wash the arms from the tips of the fingers up to and including the elbows, then to wipe the head, including the ears, then to wash the feet, including the ankles, in this order. These four have to be in this order. That's the order which is obligatory, fard. As for order within the different acts of worship, then there it is a sunnah, meaning to like washing al-madmada wal-istinshaq, washing the mouth and nose before washing the rest of the face. This we said it is a sunnah. Likewise, washing the ears after washing the rest of the head, this is a sunnah. Washing the right arm before the left arm, this is also a sunnah. Washing the right foot before the left foot, this is also a sunnah. And the next, and the final, what is usually considered the final fard in the madhab, it is al-muwala. What does al-muwala mean? Al-muwala means that each of these acts of washing in wudu, they have to be done one after the other, meaning there cannot be a long gap between them. If there is a long gap between them, then this invalidates the wudu. What's considered a long gap? It is the time in which the previous body part which was washed would become dry before completing the next one, in normal circumstances, in normal temperatures. So if the weather is a normal temperature and a person washes their face, then when it's the next body part which is washing the arms, if they don't finish washing the arms before the face dries or before part of the face dries, then this has invalidated their wudu, because there was not muwala in it, meaning one didn't occur straight after the other. And this, as I said, it has to be under normal temperatures in normal cases. As for when the temperature is not regular, meaning if it's high or low, it's very hot or very cold, in such case, then it's estimated how long it would take in a normal case for the body parts to dry. And this muwala, it is, as I mentioned, a fard, an obligation in wudu, between these four parts of wudu. So if a person does something outside of the wudu, if they're busy with another aspect which makes them take longer than they should, such as tahsilul ma, going to get water to wash the next part of their body, such as if their water ran out and they need more water to wash their arms after washing their face, for example, then here, if it takes too long and muwala is not fulfilled, then this invalidates the wudu. But if it's something which is part of the wudu, which makes them take long, such as doing a sunnah of the wudu, such as al-mubalagha, which we mentioned earlier, it is a sunnah, to do dalk rubbing, or takhleel al-lihya, to run your fingers through your beard and things like that. Or even if it's a case due to a person having a waswasa, having whispers from shaitan or something which makes them wash their body parts many times due to having shak, doubt. All of this, since it's part of the wudu, then this does not invalidate the muwala, even if it takes longer than what would normally be accepted in the condition which was that one body part dries or doesn't dry before completing the next. And the last condition, or the last fard obligation mentioned here, is an-niyyah, intention. And an-niyyah, according to the relied upon position of the Hanbali madhab, it is a shart, a condition, not a fard or a wajib. It's not an obligation, rather it is a condition, a shart. Why? Because niyyah is something which is outside of the wudu, not part of it, and has to be present before the wudu begins. And what is a niyyah? The niyyah is the intention, which is qasdu raf'i al-hadath, the intention of removing the state of impurity. Then this is the niyyah. وَمَحَلُّهُ وَمَحَلُّ النِّيَّةِ, it is in the heart. The place for the niyyah, it is in the heart. Meaning, if a person says something on their tongue which opposes what their niyyah is, then this isn't given consideration. So for example, if they are intending to do wudhu, but they say on their tongue, I'm doing tayammum, then here this is not given consideration. Rather, what's considered is the thing which is in the person's heart, what they are intending. As for saying it on the tongue, is this recommended or not? The relied upon position, the one which is in Al-Muntaha, it says that saying it on the tongue, it is mustahab, recommended, for the purpose of making sure that the person has the niyyah. And as for the position al-iqna' by Al-Hajjawi, there it says it is a bid'ah, and it is not recommended to say the niyyah on the tongue. Wallahu a'lam. And this niyyah, does the person have to remember it throughout their wudu, or do they only have to have it in the beginning? The obligation in it is that the person has to have istishab al-hukm throughout the wudu, meaning at no point do they cancel or break their niyyah. They say, I'm not doing wudu anymore, or they think, I'm not doing wudu anymore. If they do that, then the niyyah has become invalid, and therefore their wudu has become invalid. As for istishab al-dhikr, to remember the niyyah throughout, from the beginning all the way to the end, the person is remembering they're doing wudu, then this is mustahab, it is recommended, but it's not the obligation. The obligation is only istishab al-hukm, meaning the person doesn't cancel it. Even if they forget in the middle, what was I doing? Oh yes, I was doing wudu. Then this doesn't invalidate the niyyah, rather it's still valid, as long as they did not break it. And the time in which the niyyah becomes obligatory, that they have to make the niyyah from there, it is min awwal al-wajib. From the first obligatory thing, the person has to have the niyyah from there. مُقْتَرًا بِهِ أَوْ قَبْلَهُ بِزَمَنٍ يَسِيرٍ. From when they first start their wajib, the first obligation, which is in this case the tasmiyah, saying Bismillah. Before saying Bismillah, just there, they have to have their niyyah. وَلَا يَضُرُّ تَقَدُّمُهُ بِزَمَنٍ يَسِيرٍ. And if it's before that, they did their niyyah before the time where they say Bismillah. If it's before that by a short period of time, then this is also fine. And if it's before that by a long period of time, then this is invalid. So let's say, for example, if they have the niyyah now to do wudu, and they only begin their wudu after 1 hour and they never renewed their niyyah, then this is invalid, because this was before it by a long time. But if it's a short time, a few seconds, bil'urf, as per what is customary, then in such a case, there is no problem in that. And after that, so those were the furud, the obligations in wudu, and its shart being niyyah, and its sunan, recommendations. The next aspect now it is وَيُمْسَحُ عَلَى الْخُفَّيْنِ فِي الطَّهَارَةِ الصُّغْرَى وَعَلَى الْجَبِيرَةِ مِنْهُمَا. Wiping over the socks, al-khuffayn, and wiping over al-jabira, which is a cast. It is permissible to wipe over socks, al-khuffayn, in al-tahara al-sughra, in the case when a person has al-hadath al-asghar and then they make wudu, then they are allowed to wipe over their socks when they need to renew their wudu. But as for in the case of al-tahara al-kubra, when a person needs to do ghusl, then they're not allowed to wipe over their socks, rather they have to take off their socks and they have to wash their feet in ghusl, as will come later. And what are al-khuffayn? They are leather socks made out of leather. But it's also permissible to wipe over, according to the madhab, the Hanbali madhab, it is permissible to wipe over al-jawrab al-safiq, a thick sock which is made out of other materials, meaning it's not a condition for it to be a khuf, for it to be from leather, even if it's made from other materials such as as-suf, wool, or cotton, al-qutn, or anything else, even if it's made out of zujaj, glass, or if it's made out of hadid, metal, whatever the material is made out of, as long as it meets the conditions which will be mentioned now, then it's permissible to wipe over it. And the condition for al-jawrab for socks which are non-leather, such as wool socks or cotton socks, is that it has to be safiq, has to be thick, meaning لا يصف البشرة, that it doesn't show the skin underneath. If the person can see the color of the skin underneath the socks, either لرقته, due to the thinness of the socks being very thin, so this color of the skin can be seen below it, or if it is shaffaf, if it is see-through, transparent or translucent, such as if they're wiping over socks made out of glass, see-through glass, then in such a case it will not be permissible. So the condition is that the skin cannot be seen below it. And it's not a condition for the socks to prevent water from going through, from seeping through. This is not a condition in the Hanbali madhab. And other conditions which we will mention in a bit, inshallah. So it says, وَيُمْسَحُ عَلَى الْخُفَّيْنِ, it is permissible to wipe over al-khuffayn, leather socks and other socks as well, as I mentioned, في الطهارة الصغرى, in minor purification, وَعَلَى الْجَبِيرَةِ مِنْهُمَا, and as for al-jabira, which is the cast which a person puts on the injury, then this is permissible to wipe over, منهما, both in al-tahara al-sughra wa al-tahara al-kubra, in minor and in major purification. The difference being that المسح على الخفين والجوربين ونحوه, wiping over socks, this is a rukhsa, this is something which is for the purpose of ease, making it easy. As for wiping over al-jabira, a cast, this is al-azima, meaning it is the regular ruling. So it's permissible to do that both in cases of minor and in major purification. As for wiping over the socks, then these are limited to a specific time. So it says, وَيُمْسَحُ عَلَى الْخُفِّ وَيَمْسَحُ عَلَى الْخُفِّ الْمُقِيمُ يَوْمًا وَلَيْلَةً وَالْمُسَافِرُ ثَلَاثَةَ أَيَّامٍ وَلَيَالِيهِنْ مِنْ حَدَثٍ إِلَى مِثْلِهِ. The person who is wiping over the socks, they are either a muqim, a person who is a resident, or a musafir, a person who is traveling. A person who is a muqim, a resident, they are allowed to wipe yawman wa layla, for a day and one night, one day and one night, meaning for 24 hours. They're allowed to wipe for 24 hours. As for al-musafir, the one who is traveling, then they are allowed to wipe for ثلاثة أيام ولياليهن, 3 days and 3 nights, meaning 72 hours they are allowed to wipe for this period of time. And this safar, this travel, it has to be safar which is mubah, a permissible travel, meaning if they're traveling to do a sin, they're going somewhere to rob something, or going to do some haram activities, then this safar is safaru ma'asiyah, a travel for sins. Such a travel does not permit wiping over the socks, because this is a rukhsah. Likewise, the safar, the travel, it has to meet the minimum distance which permits a person to shorten their salahs. And this distance which allows a person to shorten their salah, it is arba'atu burud, or 16 farsakhan, which equals in modern units around 88 kilometers, or 54 or so miles. So a person who is traveling this amount of distance, then they are allowed to wipe over their socks for 3 days and 3 nights. And if they're traveling a distance which is less than this, then they are not allowed to wipe except for 1 day and 1 night, as if they were muqim, staying in a place. And the same thing if they're traveling, even if it meets the distance, they are traveling for a long distance, but they are traveling for safar ma'asiyah, for a sin, and they are also not allowed to combine or shorten their salahs, nor are they allowed to wipe their socks for more than 1 day and 1 night, as if they weren't traveling at all. And also the person who is traveling, they cannot be staying in a place, the place which they are residing or stopping at, it cannot be for more than 4 days. If it is 4 days, meaning 20 salawat, 20 prayers, if they are staying for longer than that, then they are not allowed to shorten their salahs, nor are they allowed to combine, nor are they allowed to wipe over their socks for more than 3 days and 3 nights. But whilst they're on the travel, meaning they haven't stopped a place, they're traveling, continuing the traveling, then they are allowed then to wipe 3 days and 3 nights. So when does this time for the wiping start, regardless of whether the person is wiping for 24 hours as a muqim, or 72 hours as a musafir when the conditions are met. This starts from al-hadath, min al-hadath, from the time when they break their wudhu. Meaning, let's say if I have wudhu and I put on my socks at 1 p.m. dhuhr time, then I break my wudhu at 3 p.m. Then I make new wudu at 5 p.m. and when I make it at 5 p.m. I wipe over my socks here. So when did the time begin? Did it begin from when I put on my socks at 1 p.m. or from when I broke my wudu or from when I wiped over my socks? The madhab says that the time begins from min al-hadath, from the time where you broke your wudu, which in this case would be 3 p.m. So meaning I'm allowed to wipe until 3 p.m. the next day. And it doesn't begin from the time you put on the socks nor from the time when you wipe over the socks. So what are the conditions for wiping over the socks? The first condition it is, which is not mentioned here but is a very important condition, it has to be ala taharatin. And yulbasa ala tahara, that the person puts on the khuf or the jawrab when they are in a state of tahara bil ma', that the tahara has to be done with water. Meaning if the person puts on their socks when they are not in a state of purification, then they are not allowed to wipe over their socks. So if a person, they don't have any wudu, they want to go make wudu, so they put on their socks and they go make wudu and then they wipe over it. This is invalid. Why? Because when they put on the socks, they had not had wudu at that time. So that's the first condition, that the person has to have put on the socks in a state of complete wudu and not partial wudu either. So an example of that would be if the person, he started their wudu and they washed all of the body parts, then they washed the right foot, then they put on the sock on the right foot, then they washed the left foot, and then they put on the sock on the left foot. Are they then later allowed to wipe when they break the wudu? No. Why? Because when they put on the right sock, they had put it on in an incomplete state of wudu, since they had not washed the left foot yet. So this is also invalid to wipe over. Likewise, if their tahara was not done with water, meaning if it was tayammum, فَلَا يَجُوزُ الْمَسْحُ عَلَى الْخُفَيْنِ لِطَهَارَةٍ مِّن تَيَمُّم. If a person, they didn't have water to make wudu, so they did tayammum. Then when they did tayammum and they put on their socks, later if they find wudu, if they find water, are they allowed to now wipe over the socks in wudu? No. Why? Because the socks they had put it on a tahara, a purification which was from tayammum, not from wudu, not from water. And the reason for that is that tayammum is a mubih and it's not a rafi'. Meaning tayammum, it doesn't remove the ruling of hadath. It's only a mubih, it permits a person to pray salah and do the acts of worship relating to it. The next condition it is ala satirin, that the person has to have put on the socks that they are wiping over, they have to be satir li mahallil fard. They have to cover the whole place which is obligatory in washing the feet in wudu. Meaning it has to cover the whole foot, the bottom and the top, including the ankles, and that it cannot have any holes. If it has holes, even a small hole, then it's not permissible to wipe over it in the Hanbali madhab. Likewise, if it is shaffaf, or it is raqiq, if it's so thin or see-through that it's able to see the color of the skin below it, as I mentioned earlier, then in such a case it's also not permissible to wipe over, since it's not satir li mahall al-fard. It's not covering the place which is obligatory in wudu from the foot. The second condition, or the third, it is أن يكون ثابتا بنفسه, that the khuf or the jawrab, the socks, they have to be thabit بنفسه. They have to stay in place by themselves. Meaning, when you put it on, it doesn't slip off. If it slips off, then it's not permissible to wipe over. Even if it slips off partially, for example, the ankle becomes uncovered when you walk, then this is not permissible to wipe over. And it has to be thabit bi nafsihi. It has to stay in place by itself. if the sock or the jawrab or the khuf, whatever it is that you're wearing to wipe over, if it doesn't stay in place by itself, meaning you have to tie it up for it to stay in place, tie it with strings, then in such a case it would not be permissible to wipe. So if a person took some pieces of cloth and wrapped it around their foot, then tied it with strings, this would not be permissible to wipe over, because those pieces of cloth, they don't stay in place by themselves, they only stay in place when they are tied with a string. So this is not permissible to wipe over. And another condition here, which is not mentioned by the Imam, it is وَأَنْ يُمْكِنَ تَتَابُعُ الْمَشِي فِيهِ عَادَةً, that the person has to be able to walk in this footwear. If it's something which a person cannot walk in, then it's not permissible to wipe over. For example, لِثِقَلِهَا, for if it's very heavy, if they're wearing some footwear made of metal and it's very heavy, not possible to walk in, then that is not permissible to wipe over. Likewise, if it's very brittle, such as if it's a brittle material, glass or plastic, that if you take some steps in, it's going to break or crack, then also it's not permissible to wipe over that. Likewise, if it's going to rip, when a person walks in it, then it will rip, then this is also not permissible to wipe over. And this walking, it has to be bil what is regular walking. It's not conditioned that the person has to walk in it in very harsh terrain. Even walking ala al-ard al-muballata, on pavements and things like that, or tiles, even that is sufficient, as long as it's something which a person is able to walk in, and it isn't something which is going to break or be too difficult or be slippery or be heavy and so on. Likewise, from the conditions for wiping over socks, wiping over al-khuf or al-jawrad, is that it has to be mubah, and yakuna mubahan. It has to be permissible to wear. If it's something which is haram to wear, then it's also haram to wipe over, and wiping over it is invalid. For example, if it was maghsoob, if it's stolen, wiping over stolen khuffain or jawrabain, then this is invalid. Or if it's made from dhahab or harir lirajul, it's made of gold or made out of silk, these are haram for men, so it's haram for them to wear it, and thereby it's also haram for them to wipe over it, and wiping over it would be invalid. And another condition for wiping over the socks is that it has to be طاهرا أن يكون طاهر العين, that the material it is made out of has to be a material which is pure. So that means أن لا يكون نجس العين, that the material it's made out of cannot be a material which is impure. Such as, for example, if it's made out of pigskin, then it's not permissible to wipe over. And this is because the material itself is impure. But this is different to, say, if impurity came on it, if it was mutanajjis. For example, if feces, it touched the khuf, then it's still permissible to wipe over, and the person just removes the impurity from it. But when it's in a material which is impure within itself, najisul ayn, then it's not permissible to wipe over. Likewise, from its conditions, أن لا يكون واسعا بحيث يرى محل الفرض, that it can't be so wide that you can see the foot from underneath it, from the gap. Then this is also not permissible to wipe over, since then it's sort of not satir li mahal al-fard. It's not really covering the obligatory area, since it can be seen from the gaps, and this is similar to as if it had holes in it, if it was mukharraq. So those are the conditions for wiping over the socks. So how does a person wipe over the socks? The wiping of the socks, al-ijza fihi, fulfilling the obligation in wiping over the socks, it is al-yumsaha aktharu al-khuf, that the person wipes most of aktharu a'la al-khuf, most of the top of the khuf, the sock or the footwear. As for wiping the bottom of it or wiping the back of it, then this does not fulfill the obligation, nor is it recommended to do so. The recommendation is only, and the obligation is only wiping over the top. And the person who wipes over the majority, most of the top, then this has fulfilled the obligation, and the wiping, al-masah al-khuffayn, is then sahih, it's valid. And if a person only wipes a small part of it, and not the majority of it, not the majority of its top, then this is invalid. And the sunnah way of wiping is that the person, they spread out their asabi', their fingers, then they wipe from the top of the toes all the way up to where the shin begins, past the, or to the top of the khuf, ila saqi, and up to the shin, wiping the top of it, not wiping the bottom nor the back of it. And it's recommended that the person wipes the right foot with the right hand and the left foot with the left hand. And the wipe is also only done once, and doing it more than once is makruh, as is the case with all of al-masahat, any sort of wiping in tahara, wiping the head, wiping the ears, wiping the feet, wiping al-jabira, a cast, and so on. All of these are only recommended to do once, and doing it more than once is makruh, as is said by Shaykh al-Buhuti in Sharh al-Muntaha. And that's the wiping. When does the wudu break? Or when does it become invalid? Firstly, when the time ends for wiping over the socks. So when the person, they had their first hadith, they broke their wudu. Then after they wipe their socks, then they're allowed to, then their wudu stays until the time ends for the permissibility of wiping the socks. So in the example given earlier, let's say the person put on the socks at 1 p.m., then they broke their wudu at 3 p.m., then they wiped at 7 p.m. or at 5 p.m. Then 3 p.m. of the next day, that's 24 hours from when they had al-hadith, from when they broke the wudu, that's when the time for wiping over the socks ends. And when it ends, the wudu which they had made by wiping their socks, that wudu also becomes invalid. It also ends. So they have to take off their socks and make new wudu with also washing the feet in it. Likewise, if a person wipes over their socks, then a part of the foot shows, whether the socks have a hole comes in the socks, if it becomes ripped, or if they slip off, or any such reason. If even a part of the foot shows from mahal al-fard, the places which are obligatory to wash, such as the ankles, or the toes, or the heel, or any part of the foot, then this also breaks the person's wudu. And min babi awla also, if they take off their socks, then this would also break their wudu. So those are some of the rulings relating to al-mash al-khuffayn, and there are obviously more rulings as well, and those which relate to al-mash al-jawrabayn and so on, and those can all be taken in another book, inshallah, in a high level book. Wallahu a'lam, and we'll stop here inshallah. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyhi Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.